Hello, everybody. I believe we're live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I am delighted to be here with my friend James. James is on the other side of the world. Say hi, James.
Hi, Renata. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Look, I'm not sure if there are people watching it. It doesn't matter. We need to carry on, don't we, James? We have a lot to talk about. And we are going to be talking about grit, which is your expertise, not mine. And I can't wait to hear more about it. James, before we begin, I have a few things that I'd like to share with everyone before we start. And I'm trying to find my notes because I've just lost it when I was talking to you just before. Oh, here it is. So, the reason why I have my notes here is because this is one of two episodes that we are recording and streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and my Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And this recording will be then part of the episode 145 of the Job Hunting Podcast. So just to give you an idea, James, we're now on 141 released this week. So we have 4 weeks before this information will be available on the podcast streaming services. And I think the benefit of watching it live would be for you to ask questions or just be ahead of the game, having the information that James is about to share with us before anybody else. So that's good too. But definitely feel free to comment and ask questions. The way that this streaming service works is we don't get to see your names. So if you want to add, I mean, you can be anonymous and that's fine by us. But if you want to add your name, just put that name in the comment. Otherwise, we can't see it here who is actually asking the question or making a comment in the StreamYard platform that we're using. So remember that. You're welcome to ask questions. I have lots of questions to ask James, but I'll definitely get to your question before we finish for sure. And for those listening later or listening now and thinking, why would I listen to it again? What I want to do when I'm editing this episode is to add some reflections at the end and maybe some action points to help you improve your job search and your career planning. So I won't have had the time to do it today, but I think it's important to add a little bit of a benefit for those that want to re-listen to the episode when it does come out on the podcast platforms, and also have that little bit of reflection and action points and tips at the end. So make sure that you watch out for that, because that will be something to look out for. And this morning, the podcast received a very good review on iTunes, James, and I want to read it out because Mark he messaged me on LinkedIn and said, look, I'm enjoying the podcast. I actually wrote a review on iTunes. And James, this is really weird. I don't know if you know that this is how it works. So when I'm looking at my podcast on my phone here on Apple iTunes, I can see I think it's 17 reviews written, but those are only reviews in Australia. So, for example, if the people that review my podcast in the US, I can't see them. Isn't it weird?
That is strange, really weird.
It's so strange. And Mac Pritchard, who is the host of My Dream Job, which is an amazing podcast. If you're not listening, go listen to it. He said, look, I can only see in the US, you only have one review. And I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And Mark is in the US. So now, today, I know I have 2 reviews.
Fantastic. We need to get Mark to spread the word. Yeah.
Please.
We need to get these US reviews and UK. I'm in the UK,
Yes.
so I'm based just outside London. So let's get those UK reviews going as well.
That's why I wrote it in my notes, because I want to ask you later to check it out and see how many reviews, if any, I have on the UK Apple iTunes. So Mark wrote, Renata, thank you for providing sensitive, real-life job advice as people navigate challenges in their job, search, and life. It's not always about achievements and impact. Sometimes mental and physical circumstances muddy our perspective and judgment and affect our outlook on worth and career. Oh, I loved it. Isn't it great? Outlook on worth
Fantastic
and
review.
career. It
Yeah.
really is.
Because a
And
lot of people are obviously in a very difficult place when they're looking for a job, when they're out of work, and it's tough. And to have
it's really
something
tough.
a go-to place with some practical pointers and some advice is very helpful for people. Yeah.
It's lovely. And I'm very privileged because I do get feedbacks like this. People usually reply to my newsletter and tell me what's going on, or they send me a message on one of the social media channels. And I'm like, thank you so much. Can you please do this on Apple iTunes? And most people, I think, don't. It's nice to have it anyway. But yeah, no, it's really lovely to see the podcast reaching so many different people. It really warms my heart. But look, today, let's talk about grit, James. So, James, for everyone listening now or later, James Brook is the founder and CEO of TalentPredix. He has over 25 years of experience working with leaders, teams, and organizations to optimize their talents, their strengths, performance, and potential. He's passionate about grit. He has a master's in organizational psychology, an MBA, and an advanced diploma in executive coaching. And I believe you wrote your thesis about grit. Is that correct, James?
No, I didn't. My thesis, my PhD dissertation is all about the emotional journey of entrepreneurs, which does touch on grit, because as we'll see later, grit is all about passion and perseverance. And my dissertation's more around entrepreneurial passion. Which is, why do entrepreneurs set up their ventures, and how do they persevere through that difficult startup journey. So it definitely kind of touches on grit, but it's not all about grit.
So in addition to all of these studies that you have already done, you're currently doing your PhD, is that right?
Currently doing my PhD. Yeah.
Oh wow, James, that's that's very courageous of you and inspiring. Maybe I'll do the same. I've always wanted to do a PhD. I've just never had the courage to move forward with it.
Yeah, it's a tough journey, but it's a very interesting journey, and it does require a lot of grit. Which, as I say, would you like me to say a little bit more about grit, Renata?
Well, what is grit, James? Let's start with that.
Sure. So there's different definitions around grit. So there's no kind of firm agreement, but essentially what it is, and Angela Duckworth has done most of the kind of the research and built out a kind of a model on what grit is. She's out of University of Pennsylvania, a professor in psychology. And she defines grit as essentially, both passion and perseverance. So it's dogged determination, really, to focus and achieve very tough goals, over the medium or longer term, but also having a real kind of deep interest and passion, for want of a better expression, in what you're doing. So really kind of loving what you're doing, enjoying what you're doing, or certainly having an interest in what you're doing. Obviously, there's a big debate in terms of whether or not you need to be passionate to be successful. But what Angela Duckworth and her team has found, which I think is really interesting, and she's not the first person to study this. There's been lots of kind of research over the decades, is that what's more important than innate intelligence and innate ability is really that practice and that perseverance and that sticking with it until you actually achieve your goals and objectives. And a lot of that is also it's about the effort, but it's also about the focus. It's really about, staying focused. And those people are more likely to achieve excellence, high levels of success, than people who, don't put in that effort and don't put in that time and don't put in that toil, if you want. And I think this is very relevant at the moment, because there's a lot of, I think, especially the younger generations, that and that's fueled by the media, that believe that success comes through sort of not a lot of work, not a lot of hard work, and it can be achieved sort of almost like overnight. If you look at some of the kind of social media influencers and that sort of thing, that also kind of amplifies this myth that we can achieve success easily. And we put sort of people on pedestals and we say, oh, look, they've become a great success, but we don't look at their history and how long and hard they've worked to achieve that success.
Yes, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I have yesterday made some updates on my schedule for the next episodes, and there's one where I haven't really thought it through, but I wrote I want to do an episode about the casino mentality and this sort of dream believing, believing in a dream, but not necessarily actioning it. And I think that during the pandemic, many of us have had this sort of dreaming of what's going to happen next without putting in the steps to take you there. And I feel that with a younger professional, especially with the younger professional, there is this tendency of, this is a play, this is a casino mentality, this is all a gamble, it
Yeah,
is what it
I
is,
think
whatever happens, and not really identifying what the effort is into getting a career on track.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think we need to be careful not to overgeneralize, because there's a lot of young people I know who work extremely hard and they're very gritty. But I think the media, as I say, are largely also here culpable, in the sense that they do portray, and we have, let's face it, we have, since the kind of beginning of kind of, civilization, we have deified innate qualities, and in so-called innate qualities, innate abilities. And so we attribute great success and great performance to individuals rather than teams, which is another kind of myth that needs to be debunked, because most great successes come about through great teamwork, as well as hard work. So I think it's this whole kind of I suppose refocusing and making sure that people understand that, yes, of course, you've got to have some innate talent, you've got to have some innate potential, but what's even more important is the hard work, is the perseverance that is required to achieve your goal. And that comes through for me, for example, as an entrepreneur, right? So I built a business over 13 years. I sold it 3 years ago. And without working 7 days a week, more than 60 hours a week, I probably would never have achieved what I achieved. And I think that's the story you get from pretty much every entrepreneur you talk to. I mean, there's very few entrepreneurs that, become kind of overnight successes. It takes a long time before their business actually gains traction and becomes successful. And even when it becomes successful financially, then they have to keep going to ensure that it stays successful, because we've seen examples like WeWork, for example, that sort of crash and burn. They're successful initially, but then through a combination of not great leadership, but also, kind of lack of sort of a good strategy and sort of perseverance, they fall, and they fall hard sometimes. So yeah, this perseverance, this effort, and so on, is what grit is really all about. And Angela Duckworth found, and it's really interesting, the research, because she's found that, across multiple kind of areas. So for example, she did a whole study, which is really interesting, just to explore, of West Point cadets. West Point being the elite military academy in the US. And she found that grit was a better predictor of success for West Point cadets through their early training than achievement tests and athletic ability, which is quite phenomenal to think about it. Also, she found similarly that for sales people, grit is the most important predictor of success for sales performers and other, sort of stressful occupations. So leadership as well. There's been research around leaders, and more gritty leaders are more likely to be successful. So, I mean, I'm sure that the listeners can think about their own network of people that they know. And I'm sure they will think that, I knew somebody, for example, at school who was really intelligent and they aced it on all the tests, but then they really struggled when they left school.
Yes.
And because they were maybe a bit restless, or they didn't apply themselves, or they never found their passion, they never found that thing that they truly loved. And that really differentiates between people who are gritty and people who, might have that innate
Yeah.
kind of, high IQ or whatever the case may be, but they don't actually achieve much in their lives.
James, how do you measure grit? What is it, an aggregate measure? I'm assuming it is an aggregate measure and it's like an equation. How do you do it?
There is a scale, and you can just go to Angela Duckworth's website. So
Okay.
you can Google Angela Duckworth, University of Pennsylvania, and you will get her website. There's a 10-item scale that you can complete. Her
Mhm.
her sort of more psychologically kind of robust scales are 8 or 12 items, but she's got a questionnaire available to the public, so anyone can go and complete it free of charge. And you can get a grit score. But also you don't even need to do that. It's worthwhile just reflecting in terms of, how focused am I
Yeah.
with the task? For example, my job hunting, how focused am I? How much interest do I have in what I'm doing, in the journey as well as the destination? Have I got a sense of purpose in terms of the type of role that I'm looking for?
Mhm.
And do I stick with it, or do I give up really easily? So these are the questions that you can kind of ask yourself to determine
Mhm.
how gritty are you. If you tend
Yeah.
to be very restless, and if you tend to sort of give up easily, and you tend to kind of, face a few barriers, and then you kind of get, down and depressed and so on, then that might indicate that you're not that gritty. So yeah, it's
James, is it
I think.
possible? Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Hmm,
Is it possible for somebody to be gritty about something but not about other things? I'm assuming it could be the case, because could
yeah,
it be like a,
yeah.
then I'm here thinking, is this a trait? Like I never go forward with anything. I don't have a sense of purpose, or this is not my purpose, so I can't feel the grit moving this thing forward. Maybe if I focus on something else. It's hard, isn't it, to kind of figure out if it's one or the other. For me, I'm finding it hard as I listen to you, but is it
Yeah.
this, is it so for others as well?
Yeah, Renata, I think it's important to have part of grit is finding your passion, finding
Mm,
what really interests you, and also having a clear sense of purpose. So, for example, as a runner myself, and I'm sure some of the listeners are runners, I don't think to myself, okay, I'm gonna this week go on sort of three, 5K runs or whatever the case may be, or 10K runs. I think to myself, actually, what's really important is that I'm training towards an objective, a broader goal, and I want to stay healthy, and I want to increase my fitness and so on. And that's about that higher purpose. And when I come back, even though it might be really difficult to go out for that run, difficult to get out the door, put my shoes on and that sort of thing, I know that when I come back from that run, I'm going to feel really great. I'm going to feel better than when I left. And so I do it, even though sometimes it's really tough to do. So it's really about hooking into that higher purpose. What's meaningful for you, what's interesting for you, what do you really enjoy doing, what do you want to become, what sort of future self are you striving to achieve. And so keying into those passions, keying into those interests, having that clear sense of purpose, and that will actually make it easier
mm,
for you, even to do the stuff that you might otherwise find mundane and difficult, like me going for that run sometimes every
yeah.
week. It's like it's quite difficult sometimes to get out the door, especially when it's really cold outside.
Mm. I'm also thinking about grit as we get older. Have you looked into this? I'm not sure what happens because, as you know, as a career coach, I have clients that are often in mid-career struggling to find their purpose. It's almost like they went through this massive marathon from, early career to mid-career, and then lost their mojo completely sometimes. They're really, really struggling to find their sense of purpose in life, in their careers, and they're really lost at that sort of mid-career point. What could be happening there? Is it just the passion, or is it that it wears out and you need to maybe recharge the batteries of your grittiness over time?
Well, losing your purpose could happen for a variety of reasons, Renata, and it's really at that point, it's a signal to you to take stock and to rediscover, what's really important to you, what value do you want to bring, and to get help from others to express. So it might be a coach, or it might be a mentor, it might be your partner, or it might be a peer, colleague, whatever the case may be, a friend, to bring in other people to help you, because through bringing in other people to help you, that can also build your grit. And going back to your point around grit, and are you born with grit? Is it a trait that's kind of part of some people and not part of other people? Certainly some people develop grit earlier in their life through going through a lot of difficult circumstances, hardships, and that sort of thing, and overcoming them. So they might develop more grit earlier in life. Other people can still learn grit later in life, though. And that's the really encouraging thing for all of us. So it doesn't matter what stage you are at life, you can be gritty. But the point is not to simply dive into lots of things without stepping back and reflecting and saying, what I really value, what's important to me, how can I feel that I'm doing worthwhile and meaningful work. And some people, unfortunately, they just think, I need a job, and I'm going to take the first thing that comes along. And they take a job, and then they regret taking that job. And that, of course, undermines their self-confidence. Yeah. And through undermining their self-confidence, it'll also undermine their grittiness. It's much better to find something that you feel, actually, I'm going to focus on this now. And then to recognize that there's going to be setbacks and challenges along the way. And that's all part of that growth process. So if you're not sometimes navigating through really choppy waters, then you're not going to, ever grow, and you're not going to realize your full potential. And so just recognizing that, because a lot of people give up too quickly. I was having a chat with a group yesterday in a company, and we were talking about careers. And I was saying a lot of people, they give up too quickly before they've actually, kind of got that traction. They've found their way. They've built up those capabilities that allow them to be at their best, that allow them to, kind of achieve everything that they can achieve. And so I think, there's a challenge out there. And again, some of the younger generation I see this with, it's like, I just want the next promotion, or I just want that quick success, rather than actually saying to themselves, if I put in that hard graft, then I'm going to be really kind of successful and achieve my full potential. A little bit like, at Glastonbury, we saw Paul McCartney, right, at the age of 80. And, I saw him, I watched him, and I thought, wow, great performance, giving an awesome performance. But behind that performance is decades, literally decades of hard graft, hard work to get to where he's got to. So he's got, a fabulous voice, and of course he's got some natural talent to sing. But why does he stand out so much from other people? Why is he still singing like he is at the age of 80? Well, because he works hard at it. He doesn't just work hard in terms of his singing, but he works hard in terms of keeping fit, keeping healthy. He's apparently pretty obsessive about keeping healthy. And by the way, grit is not about being obsessive. In fact, it is a very timely conversation here in the UK, because obviously in the UK, we've got Boris Johnson, who's sort of, clinging on to power, even
That's
though all
not
his ministers are resigning. That's not grit, right? This is and this is an important distinction for the listeners,
right?
Because grit is not about being obsessive, because if you get that maniacal kind of obsessiveness, then that's the kind of the overused, or the tip over into that danger zone, where really you've also got to know when to walk away, or rather than just keep kind of. So for example, if with one of your listeners, they might be applying for a job, and they might have a particular company in mind, a particular role in mind, and they might say, that's the role I want. That's aligned with my purpose. I'd love to do that role. And then they go and they apply, and they, get rejected, and they might say, oh, I'll apply again, and I'll apply again, and they might get through the first 2 rounds, they get rejected again. And it's good to also know when to step back and not become so obsessive that you actually overinvest. So I think there's a fine line there that's worth.
Yes. Well, that's what I love about the work that you do at TalentPredix, because having now done over 160 assessments, which we will talk about at the next session. So watch the interview coming up in a few hours with Paula Betu. What I've noticed is that the TalentPredix assessment that you guys very cleverly developed has that overflow of when a talent overflows. I remember when you explained this to me last year, I was like, this is brilliant. This is really
the overused talents. Yes.
Overused talent.
Overused talents, or
I love
using
that.
them in excess. Yeah.
Yes. Because everything can be great up to a point, and then there's a line there when it does get overused. So I like the explanation. And talking about that line that you sort of came up with, I just wanted to kind of explain to those listening now and later how I understood grit in my own words, and then you correct me if I'm wrong, right? So grit, like many other psychological measures, has a dial. Everybody has a dial. I like this Martin Seligman explanation of using the dial. You're born with at a certain point of that dial, and you can work yourself up to different points. So if you have more or less resiliency, more or less confidence, more or less optimism, hope, and so on, you kind of have that self-awareness of where you are on the dial, and then work on that dial with education, with development, so that you can become grittier if you feel like you give up very easily on things. Now, I have a person. Did I get it right? Is that kind of?
Yeah, you've got it. You've got a baseline, right? And
Yeah.
that baseline depends on obviously your genetic makeup, but it also what you're born with. It, in other words, your innate sort of ability and the traits. But then you can learn, and this is the great thing about things like grit. We can definitely learn to be, because grit, when you break it down, is essentially about focus. Do I stay focused on tasks that I really enjoy, finding your interests and staying focused on them and not deviating too much from those?
Yes.
And of course, in this modern world, it's very difficult sometimes to stay focused, and people get really distracted, and some people are just too restless actually to achieve their full potential. So it's really about how can I become more focused and get rid of, say no to those things that are going to distract me. And the other part of it is that whole effort piece, which is, I've really got to put in that effort and recognize that the more effort I put in, the more a return I'm likely to get. There was a great story, actually, if I can just share it, Renata.
Sure, go ahead.
Charles Darwin was writing a bunch of letters to, obviously the very famous evolutionary biologist, was writing a bunch of letters to his cousin, who was actually more academically, more academically talented than Charles Darwin was. And Charles Darwin acknowledged this. Charles Darwin said, look, I'm relatively kind of, ordinary bloke with actually kind of below average intelligence.
Right.
But they concluded between them in these letters, in this correspondence they wrote to each other, that the basis of peak performance or excellence, which obviously Charles Darwin achieved and his cousin didn't achieve, even though his cousin was more, kind of innately intelligent, was that hard work and that passion. Because of course, what Charles Darwin did is over the decades, he collected all these sort of biological specimens, and he created this theory about evolution, which just goes to show, again, that the more kind of time, the more effort, the more you persevere, the more you're likely to realize your full potential and achieve what you hope to achieve, because many people never realize their full potential in their lifetime.
That's so funny that you mentioned that exchange of letters and how one was smarter than the other, but the other did better, because I was about to tell you a story about my grandfather who started 6 different university degrees until he finally and finished one. And I was going down that same track because I started 3, and by the time I enrolled in the 3rd one, my family had lost hope. Like, no, she's not going to finish it. But when I was in high school, in Brazil, you know how you don't know this because you're in the UK. Here in Australia, on grade 6, everyone goes to Canberra to visit Canberra. In
Mm,
Brazil, everybody goes to a town called Preto. That's black gold. That's where all the Brazilian gold came from in the 1700 and all of that. And my grandfather grew up in that little town, and we stayed. The accommodation was his former boarding school. Look how the coincidence. I had no idea. So when I stayed there, I saw photos of my grandfather and his brother. And I was
wow.
like,
Yeah.
oh, this is really weird. It was so cute. It was the cutest thing. I mean, there were photos of all the
Yeah.
students, but the students were ranked by how good they were. So the top students were shown first in the photo. Yeah, those things that, we don't do anymore. But my grandfather wasn't the smartest person. And in the end, after all of that journey trying to find a degree that he liked and he ended up doing, he actually became quite successful in what he did. And his brother, who was very, very smart, was top of the class, finished as ducks, didn't do so well. And my grandfather, in
Mm,
fact, supported his entire family at some stage, and it was really
mm,
interesting to see that difference there, from somebody who was also, um, in his journey to find purpose and something he really loved,
mm.
was told he didn't have grit. Not maybe grit, but perseverance, or whatever other word was fashionable at the time. People had lost hope with my grandfather. He was considered a bohemian and somebody that didn't. When in fact, I think not everybody has a sense of purpose from the beginning. And he
Yeah.
had the privileged position of being raised by a family that could afford his change of mind. And
Yeah,
then
but
in the
sometimes
end,
you have to, and I think this is a great example, Renata, and it's a lovely story, because
he's
I
one
think
of
it
the
also.
founders of Embraer, by the way, if anyone has flown on a Banderantes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Apologies for that, because not many people enjoy flying in small planes.
But it does I think
Yeah.
underline, I think, the importance of grit, but the
Yeah.
other thing that I think it really kind of highlights is this notion that you sometimes have to experiment quite a bit to find your true calling and your true kind of
Yes.
sort of purpose, if you want. And I think what I do see though is sometimes people tend to go almost like too far with that experimentation, and they don't settle. They just become too restless, and that's fine if that's okay with them. If that's their definition of success in life, is lots of variety, doing lots of different things and so on, that's fine. But if people are starting to feel frustrated by that, and they're starting to think, oh, I'm drifting, and I'm not achieving what I hope to achieve, I'm not fulfilling my potential, that's really kind of a signal to people that actually they
Yeah.
need to probably just settle in to one thing. There might be a half a dozen things that they're really interested in. Settle into one thing and then focus on that one thing. And I'm a little bit like that because I'm very creative, right? So I have
Mhm.
lots of different ideas, and I could probably be doing a half a dozen things or more, probably dozens of things actually,
Yeah.
that I'm interested in, that I'm curious about. But
That's the hard
and
thing when you're a creative entrepreneur, isn't it?
absolutely, but I've kind
Yes.
of trained myself to focus and to say, okay, well, I'm going to focus in around leadership, around talent, because those are the areas that I've got a lot of experience. I've got a lot to offer, I think, and I can make an impact in those areas. And so I exert my effort and my focus around those areas, and I just say, okay, the other stuff maybe I can do in my retirement, or maybe I can do one or two things as a bit of a hobby kind of side gig, or whatever the case may be. But the major effort and focus is going to be on the things that is in line with my purpose.
Do you think part of having grit is also the understanding that things take a long time to be understood, to be learned, to achieve the success? So I'll give you an example. A lot of people come to me for coaching and they think that if they sign up with me, they will get a job next month. And then when I tell them, look, sometimes the selection process takes a month and a half, and the best chance you have at the end of that process is 50% because you're competing with, let's say, one other candidate, if not two, in which case it's 33%. So people don't, it's that thinking fast and slow situation when people are not very good at judging how to proceed with their plans and not making good plans because of that. Do you
I
think
think
that there is a lack of understanding of how long it takes for you to be successful?
Definitely, Renata,
Mm.
definitely, without a doubt. I think, and again, the media and our society encourages this action orientation, right? If you're not doing something, then you can't be working hard. Yeah. Now,
Mhm.
I know a lot of people who they spend a lot of time planning and reflecting, and they're incredibly effective. Why? Because they're actually able to step back from that action orientation,
Right.
and they're actually able to say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think, and I'm going to plan, I'm going to sense make, and I'm going to engage others, to support me in doing that. And that takes time. And so that's slowing down to speed up, which I think is such a great principle, that slowing down to speed up, because I think in this sort of society, people are often encouraged, if you're not doing something like for example, with a job hunt, right? If you're not sending out lots and lots of CVs to lots and lots of agencies and lots and lots of people, well, then you're not going to be successful.
Mhm.
And that's not the greatest route to success, because what people need to do is step back and say, what role would I really like to do? How am I going to get that role? Who's going to help me to get that role? And so it's all those sorts of questions that they need to be asking in order to, how can I put together the best, sort of email, cover letter, or CV, resume to get that role? How can I, what other, kind of approaches and strategies can I use, and so on? And that's all
Yeah.
about that planning, and it's stepping back from that kind of that excessive action orientation, which so many people have nowadays. So I agree. I think again, it relates to this kind of whole thing around, this culture or the society on steroids.
Yes.
We have, unfortunately, now a world where things are expected to happen so quickly, and there's so much information overload that people, get distracted rather than actually focusing and planning and thinking what they gonna be doing and how they need to do it. So I think, yeah, definitely.
So we have understood that grit is, we can find out how much grit we have by going to a website, and I'll link
Mm,
that in the episode show notes when this episode
yeah.
goes live. So we have Gray who's been listening, and she said Angela Duckworth's work is awesome. So we'll make sure that we do that. Then we also know that it can be learned or developed, so we can work on it. We need to be careful for it not to go overboard
Mm,
and become detrimental to our career
yeah.
success if we're thinking about
An obsession,
an
I
obsession.
think unless
Yeah.
you're an elite athlete, I think elite athletes and so on, or
Mm,
elite performers, they have to be a little bit obsessive, and many of them are, actually, the research shows. But
yes.
I think other than that, unless you want to be kind of, as I say, one of those kind of elite performers, other than that, you shouldn't be obsessive, because that's going to interfere with other aspects of your life, your kind of home life and your personal life and so on. So it's really important to integrate in a more harmonious way your grits with sort of balance in your life.
Yes, yes. And we looked, I agree. And by the way, if anyone is interested in understanding elite sports and grittiness, there is a Netflix, I believe it's a Netflix episode. Um, it's actually a documentary that has several different people interviewed, and one of them is Caitlyn Jenner, who won one or two Olympic medals, and she I watched that in awe of the perseverance and the absurdity of her goal. Like, it's absurd to be so focused, right? But that's
Yeah.
what we see in elite
Yeah.
athletes. If we can transfer just a tiny bit of that understanding and that um, development of a routine where you are learning every day and building muscles every day. And we can use that metaphor to understand muscles in your executive career as developing yourself as a leader, as a colleague, as a somebody that will do effective work, that will um, do better reports and better presentations each day, and not seeing a day, an off day, as something to be considered a failure, but just an opportunity to learn. To in job hunting, not see um, a selection process that didn't go your way as a failure, but as an opportunity to look at continuous improvement. So what can I learn from this to
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
next time, right?
Yeah, it's very related to the growth mindset, Renata. And you know, I
Mm.
always say to people, you know, the principle around marginal gain. So, you know, which is really about doing 100 things 1% better. But it's not just about doing 100 things 1% better, yeah, or becoming 1% better every day. You become 40% better over the course of the year, right? Or around 40%. But it's also about making sure that that is focused around a clear goal and purpose,
Mhm.
and not to be distracted, and having that ability to say no to stuff, and bringing in people to support you as well. Because the more people you have to support you, we've got to think not so much individually, but we've got to think about grit also, about, you know, building a personal board of directors, or, you know, building a network of people around us who can make us feel more gritty, you know,
Mhm.
who can help us to persevere through those challenging times, because there are going to be challenging times. And in
Yeah.
fact, if you achieving your full potential, you're going to experience more headwinds. You're going to experience more kind of buffeting, because that's the nature of excellence and high performance.
I
And
know.
so it's about surrounding yourself, as I say, with people who can really support you and energize you and encourage you and help you through those difficult times. If you've got a lot of people that drain your energy, I would suggest also that you try and maybe in the same way a gardener would prune, you know, the
Mhm.
garden, it's also important to prune our relationships as well, and keep the people and spend more time with the people that really energize us and make us feel more powerful, if you want, make us feel more confident, make us feel more more gritty. And as I say, some of the people that make, also people that can help us learn, and then sort of cut out the people who really drain our energy, or spend less time with them. Sometimes we can't cut them out, so, you know, because they are
Yes.
family
What do
members
you
and so on.
do? Exactly. I was about to ask you, what do you do with family members that don't understand your perseverance, your grittiness, and um, your dedication to something that is so important to you? Do you have a pitch, something that you can share with us, an idea? Because you can't just opt out of some relationships, James.
No, you can't, Renata. You're right, and that's why I said it's about maybe either spending less time with them, or if it's somebody really close to you, it could be, you know, your partner, it could be your kids, or whatever the case may be. Then what's really important, I think, is that you also just help them understand why, you know, that grittiness is important for you, and why that focus is important for you, and also align around expectations in terms of some of the sacrifices and trade-offs that you're going to have to make. I mean, if you look at all the greatest performers in the world and the people who have done really well, I mean, one of the people who's inspired me massively is Nelson Mandela.
Mhm.
Nelson Mandela was incredibly gritty, spending those decades in prison and coming out, and, you know, being a great premier for South Africa. In so many respects, he was really gritty, but
Mm.
he made tremendous sacrifices
Yes.
in his personal life, in particular. You know, And so it's really about that kind of, I suppose, that leveling with your partner and saying, this is really important to me and this is why it's important to me, and
Yes.
is that okay, kind of thing, and are you happy to support me? I'm not expecting you to show the same level of determination and perseverance as myself, but is it okay, for you to at least support me and encourage me? And if I'm getting into that, if I'm tipping over into that obsessive zone, let me know, keep me in check.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add to that because I think we're both gritty, you and I. I'm not sure about your partner, uh, but I'm usually the one that initiates a transformation in our family. I'm the one who wanted to move to Australia. I'm the one who decided I didn't want a permanent job anymore, and I'm very blessed that Andre supports me. But he supports me because he has to, not necessarily because he believes in it. I hope he's not listening to this.
Well, probably because
I'll
he
have to
loves you,
explain
Renato,
to him.
not
He
because he
loves
has
me.
to.
But what I like about this devil's advocacy that he plays in my life and in our life as we're planning our lives together is a level of accountability, and it forces me to come up with milestones so that he can agree with what I'm going for. So I'll say to him, look, I'm going to look for another job and I'm hoping that it will happen in 6 months time, and between now and then I need to have this space just to job search without you asking me every day how it's going. So that is the same if you're doing career transition, like many clients of mine are doing, moving from one career to another, or from having a full-time job to becoming more entrepreneurial and building their portfolio careers. Those transitions are hard to do when your partner is not necessarily on the same ball as you are. It's just not
Yeah.
really easy to do those career transitions. And I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as an accountability and an opportunity for you to present a plan of action and agree on some milestones together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it is about the nature of partnership, isn't it? And how we define, what does a good partnership look like? A good partnership is about understanding each other, being there for each other, supporting each other, but not necessarily being the same. So we don't necessarily need to be the same people, but it's about, and it's the same with, for example, my wife. It's about making sure we kind of sharing in an open and honest way, how we feeling at any one kind of point, and making sure that, I know that she's very good at keeping me in check in terms of some boundaries, because if she wasn't in my life, then I wouldn't have many boundaries. And when I have been on my own, before I met her, for example, I was working until 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd kind of get up the next morning at 6 o'clock and carry on working. So because I love what I do, I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky that in the main, most of the time, not all the time, I love what I do. And when I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I remind myself of why I'm doing it. It's a little bit like that running analogy I was using earlier. When I'm running and I'm thinking it's damn cold outside and I'm really, it's maybe raining and I'm feeling pretty miserable. I'm thinking, well, I'm doing it because I want to stay healthy. I want to do that half marathon because I do a lot of half marathons now. And that's what I'm working towards. I'm working towards that kind of that bigger goal, that bigger objective.
So you touched on something that I think is gold, which is the fact that in order for you to embrace that grittiness, you can't really rely on motivation alone.
No.
That's why I'm so disciplined with my time. And Andrea, husband, I don't know why we're talking about our partners here, but he makes fun of me. He mocks my calendar because my calendar there's a bit of time allocated for everything that I do. And it's really because if I am only relying on my motivation, I will wake up tomorrow and I won't feel motivated to do it.
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
won't do it. Whereas if it's in my calendar, I will do it. So the only free resource, of course, this podcast is a free resource, everyone. But if you go to my website or even the episode show notes for this podcast, I give for free a schedule for job hunting. It's called the Optimized Job Search schedule, and there's a masterclass that's also free that goes with it, because I'm not going to give everything that I do for free, James, but I will give that for sure. Because if you can at least initiate your job search with a schedule, there's nothing more difficult in an executive career or professional career than looking for work when you're unemployed,
I think
right?
that's right. I think that's right, Renata. I think it's about that planning that I was talking about earlier. It's
Yeah.
about that before you jump in and do anything, it's about that stepping back. And I'm so glad that you providing people with resources to do that, where you've got a schedule, you're blocking out time, and you're saying, okay, well, I need to plan this, and then I need to focus on executing the plan. And part of that
Mhm.
planning really should be who can help me, who can
Yes.
I connect with, who can really help me, in terms of people who can encourage me, people who can maybe mentor me, people who can maybe help me with networking, so people are going to play different roles.
Mm.
But it's really about that intentionality and that focus, and then just sticking to plan and recognizing that not everything is going to go to plan. You're going to
No.
have to evolve that plan. You're going to have to change that plan. But having that plan and trying insofar as possible to stay focused, and then also saying no, because people are going to be asking for your time and so on. And it might be you're going to have to say to your partner, actually, I've got to spend, I can't be with you, on the weekend, or I can't go to that particular kind of party, whatever the case may be, because this is really important for me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I'm gonna execute that plan with
Yeah.
discipline,
Yes.
and persevere until I achieve that particular goal.
Mm. That's gold. Yeah. No, you did say that before, and I just decided to say it again to reinforce the message. Oh, James, look, it's been fantastic talking to you. I think we need to have more time together, and have you on the podcast at least once a year, like we've had you last year and now again. We have a note here from Ratna: Freedom Writers, a movie example of a partner who can't support his wife, Erin Gruwell. Hilary Swank, who is super gritty. Okay, thank you, Ratna. We will add the link to Freedom Writers below in the episode show notes when it's live, because I love giving people homework that is not necessarily career related, just get inspiration from something else, so you can have a break from job hunting every now and then. James, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know it's the morning
Been a,
there for you.
it's
Thank you
been a
for
pleasure.
making the
Been a
time.
pleasure, Renata. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for inviting me on. And I'll be delighted to come on again.
I will do. Will do. And congratulations on TalentPredix. I'm loving using it. And when this episode is live, I will definitely include an information there about what we're doing together and how to reach out and do the assessment.
Fantastic. Yep.
All
You,
right.
you, you, you take care. All the best.
Bye for now. Bye, everyone.